This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there.
From Innistrad to Shadowmoor, what spooky top 10 does Nitsuhone have in store?
Hi everyone, I'm Nitsuhone, and it's Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. And it's a Friday in October, and that means that this is a spooky MTG Top 10. Doing Halloween-themed MTG Top 10s is not a new thing for me at all. I've been doing MTG Top 10s since 2016, and that year is the first time I did Halloween-themed MTG Top 10s. Back in 2016, the second Halloween MTG Top 10 I ever did looked at the spider creature type. Spiders are thought of as spooky animals, and fake versions of them and their webs are pretty common decorations, so they're a good fit for the month of October. This video is an update to that 2016 list, which has changed pretty significantly over the last 5 years, as you might imagine. To be eligible for this list, a card had to have the spider creature type or be capable of making a spider creature token. In all, 67 cards were eligible for this list, and in this video we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. And actually, we'll be looking at more than 10, since as usual when I do these updates, I like to take a brief look at the cards that are no longer on the list. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A top 8 at a tier 1 event is worth 2 points, and a top 8 at a tier 2 event is worth 1 point. Alright, let's get started. So, the first card to fall off of the list was Spider Spawning. Back in 2016, my MTG Top 10s were in their infancy, and since back then there were only 8 spiders with points, I decided to just have number 9 and number 10 be spider cards I liked. That's not really something I do now, obviously, as I just don't do a list until there are at least 10 cards with points. Anyway, Spider Spawning made the list simply because it was a really fun card in Innistrad Limited. One of the most fun build-arounds we've ever seen in a limited format. But it has 0 points and hasn't gained any since 2016, so yeah, it's no longer on the list. Nyx Weaver is the other card in that category. It was a really fun card in Limited and has a neat design, so it made the list because of that. It didn't have any points in 2016, and it doesn't have any now either. The last of the 3 cards to fall off of the list is Stinger Fling Spider. It actually has 1 point, and it came in a Birthing Pod deck in 2012. Pod decks like running singleton creatures they can tutor into play, and Stinger Fling can be pretty good in the right situation, as adding a nice defensive body to the board while also killing a flyer can be a pretty big deal. Still, it hasn't gained any points since 2012, and 1 point wasn't enough to make the list this time around, so it's no longer in the top 10. Alright, let's move into the top 10. At number 10, it's Silklash Spider. As we already saw looking at the cards that fell off of the list, spiders really don't like flyers. Flavor-wise, this seems to be a reflection of their ability to spin webs that would be a big problem for flying animals, especially because spiders in Magic tend to be so large. But yeah, almost all spiders come with reach, and some of them have additional abilities to hate on flyers, and Silklash Spider is an example of that. It not only brings a fairly beefy reach body to the table, it can also just decimate the flyers on the battlefield with its activated ability. It gained its only points in Onslaught block constructed in 2003, so its position on this list is definitely in danger. For one thing, Loth Spider Queen still doesn't have any points, and it's hard to imagine that continues to be the case. At number 9, it is Giant Trapdoor Spider. It has the same number of points as Silklash Spider. Its 2 points came in a deck that won Pro Tour Columbus in 1996, as opposed to just top 8ing the event, so I gave it the higher slot. Silklash Spider was ahead of Giant Trapdoor Spider back in 2016, but that's because I didn't really have a method to break ties back then. Like Silklash Spider, Giant Trapdoor Spider has fallen significantly since 2016. Back then it was number 4, and now it's barely making the list. Unlike most spiders, Giant Trapdoor Spider doesn't have reach. Flavor-wise, this actually makes some sense, as real-world trapdoor spiders don't spin webs the same way other spiders do, and generally make their traps on the ground. However, it does still hate on flyers and can give itself up to take one down that's attacking. That, coupled with what was then a reasonable 3-mana 2/3 stat line, made it so the Spider was actually a reasonable card for red-green aggro decks back in 1996. Its spot on the list is pretty precarious though, just like Silklash Spiders. At number 8, it is Penumbra Spider. It has actually gained points since 2016, but because the bottom 2 cards on the list back then didn't have any points and were completely removed, it's actually moved down in the ranking. Penumbra Spider is pretty nice because it gives you a 2/4 reach token when it dies. This can be especially good in more defensive decks since the 2 bodies are a pain to make aggressive decks get through. In Standard, the Spider gained a Grand Prix top 8 in blue-green Pickles, a deck built around locking the opponent out of the game with Brine Elemental, and the Spider really helped you buy yourself enough time to do it. More recently, it's been played in Pauper, where it's been played in defensive decks like Turbo Fog. It's likely to gain more points in Pauper going forward. At number 7, it is Arasta of the Endless Web, a card that wasn't even close to existing in 2016 as it only came out in 2020. Arasta brings some nice defensive spider stats as a 4-mana 3/5 with reach, but her power really comes from her ability to hate on instant and sorcery spells, since she generates spider tokens anytime your opponent casts one. This often means that even if your opponent can kill Arasta right away, and they're usually going to have to because she tends to get in the way, but even if they do kill her right away, she's going to leave behind some nice value. And if she's left in play unchecked, she can dominate some matchups. While she was played a bit in Standard, she didn't actually gain any points as a result of that, but she has seen more significant play in both Modern and Legacy. In the former, she's played in the sideboard of Panza and Amulet Titan decks, and in the latter, she gained 1 point in the sideboard of a Maverick deck. She's likely to continue to gain points going forward. At number 6, it's Woolly Spider. Back in the 2016 list, I somehow only gave this 2 points, despite the fact that it has 2 Pro Tour top 8s coming from 1995 and 1996, so it actually has more points now, but not because it has been played at all since 2016. The card might not look super impressive today, but a 3-mana 2/3 with reach was a decent enough rate, especially because it became a 2/5 when it blocked flyers. This meant it could block most flyers and could even stonewall one of the game's earliest powerhouse creatures, Sarah Angel. This is what allowed it to put up a couple of Pro Tour top 8s in the mid-90s. At number 5, it is Hidden Spider. It wasn't on the list at all last time and wasn't really being played anywhere back then. However, in the years since then, Pauper has increasingly become a competitive format and one that is supported by Wizards of the Coast, and that's where Hidden Spider has gained all of its points. The Spider is part of a pretty neat cycle of enchantments in Urza's Saga. These hidden enchantments all become creatures when your opponent does something specific, and the creature you get is quite efficient on all of them. In the case of Hidden Spider, you get a 1-mana 3/5 with reach, which is obviously pretty awesome. It needs your opponent to actually play a flyer for that to happen though. It's played in the sideboard of mono-green aggro decks in Pauper, where it can be brought in against decks that have a lot of flyers. It's likely to continue to gain more points in Pauper. At number 4, it's Pale Recluse. The Recluse does not have very good stats as a 6-mana 4/5 with reach, but land cycling for 2 different basic land types is some nice upside. It made the list last time at number 7 with only a single point. Its additional 6 points are from a combination of being played more since 2016, as well as my not actually assigning points to World Championship top 8s back then, which was obviously pretty silly. It has actually only gained 2 points since 2016 and an additional 4 from points it should have had back then. These additional points moved it from number 7 to number 4. In any case, the Recluse has been played in Modern Living In decks. These decks are loaded up with cycling creatures that can be used to rip through the deck, and then eventually you get Living In going, and all those cyclers come back from your graveyard, and your opponent's board gets blown up. It doesn't have any points since 2017, and these days there are better cyclers around for Living In decks. At number 3, it is Jungle Weaver, which slipped from the number 2 spot to the number 3 spot. It's in the same boat as Pale Recluse in more ways than one. Both are big spiders with cycling, both didn't get credit for top 8s at Worlds back in 2016, and both are played in Living In decks. In the case of Jungle Weaver, it broke onto the scene earlier and was played in extended versions of Living In before transitioning to Modern. Like Pale Recluse, it hasn't been played anywhere since 2017. At number 2, it's Chainweb Aracnir, another spider that didn't exist back in 2016. It was printed in 2020. It's another spider that doesn't just hate on flyers by having reach, it also does damage equal to its power to an opposing flyer when it enters the battlefield. That's not the most impressive thing ever at 1 mana, though being able to kill a 1/1 flyer definitely matters. It's extra powerful though thanks to Escape, since you can pay 5 and exile 4 other cards from your graveyard to bring it back as a 4/5, and that's some impressive size that's capable of taking down most flyers. It was a common sideboard card in green decks in Standard. It hasn't gained any points since rotating out of the format though. And at number 1, by a whole lot, it's Ishkanah, Graph Widow. She was a brand new card back in 2016 and was already number 1 on this list with 18 points. She's gained 32 points over the last several years, only extending her lead over the other spiders on this list. She is a fitting card to have the top slot too, since she's one of the few cards in the game that's a tribal spider payoff. On her own, Ishkanah is not super impressive. A 5-mana 3/5 with reach and an expensive spider payoff is not great. However, if you can get Delirium going, she adds a ton to the board for a very efficient cost. She becomes a 5-mana 3/5 that also gives you 3 1/2s with reach that synergize with her activated ability. That's a heck of a deal, and also the kind of thing that aggro decks will have basically no chance of punching through. Ishkanah was played pretty heavily in Standard. In most decks it could get Delirium going. This included in dedicated Sultai and Golgari Delirium decks, but also decks like Golgari Constrictor, various energy decks, and T-Merge. She's also gained points in Pioneer Delirium decks and World Gorger Dragon decks in Legacy. These decks look to combine the World Gorger and Animate Dead, which lets you create a cycle where all your stuff gets exiled and comes back into play, including your lands, and you can tap them for mana every single time. You can combine that infinite mana with Ishkanah to kill your opponent with her ability. And she's also pretty nice because she can help stall until you can pull off your combo. She doesn't have any points so far in 2021, but she's powerful enough that we can't really count her out entirely, and even if she doesn't ever gain another point, she's going to be atop this list for a very long time. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you want to own any of these spooky spiders, you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each of them in the description. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure to catch future episodes of this series, including more spooky top 10s this month, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to catch up on past videos, you should see some playlists on your screen shortly. Lastly, if you want to go the extra mile supporting the channel, you can do that on Patreon. Thanks for watching.